everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for coming. This is, of course, the council's listening post, but I want to begin with reviewing changes that we'll be proposing for the Constitution. And then if there are other items related to council's work, I'll certainly entertain those after we've gone through the constitutional changes. But it is important for us to share these in advance. It's important for us to be timely about the ways in which we undertake these changes. So I wanted to be sure we had an opportunity today to share with you what's proposed. On your tables are printed copies of the changes that are proposed for the revision. You're welcome to take those with you. I'm not going to go through all of that document here. I'm going to go through something of a summary of that document. Constitutions are not particularly engaging reading material for most of us, but they are important, particularly in times of crisis. So periodic attention to our Constitution, while it may be tedious, is important to ensuring that we offer our staff and our congregation the guidance and protection we would need if problems arose. So today we'll focus for a few minutes on the task of its revision. As I mentioned here in the fellowship hall, there are printed copies of the changes that are proposed for the revision. For those of you joining online, a link to this document was provided in the Friday email. And if you can't access that, I'm confident that you can contact the office for a link to the document from there if you didn't see it before. Every 3 years, the ELCA Churchwide Assembly meets, and among its items of business is review and revision of the model Constitution, and this is the year. As an ELCA congregation, we are obliged to follow the model Constitution provided by the ELCA. In this Constitution revision year, the Assembly put forth both required and optional changes to be made in congregations' constitutions. And we also have provisions that we are proposing for our Constitution that are unique to Gloria Dei. Since review of the Constitution would occur this year, it just seemed prudent to review our own specific provisions as well. The Gloria Dei staff, the executive committee, and the council have been giving attention to this task for the past few months. And today I want to share with you the outcome of that work. Council has considered the items from the Churchwide Assembly and those proposed from the executive committee for Gloria Dei specifically. And next we will turn to you for approval of these changes. The approval process is complicated. I will say required provisions from the model Constitution can be approved. We will have a special meeting in December on December 11th, the same day as the budget meeting. So we'll have the budget meeting and then we'll have a constitutional meeting. And at that date, the required provisions from the model Constitution can be voted on for approval. I will tell you that I asked voted on for approval. I will tell you that the simple answer was it's not an option. So we will. Provisions inconsistent with the model, this will apply to one item that I'll speak to in a little while, will require 2 votes. So it will require a vote at the December meeting and again at the meeting in January. And the timing for all of this is why I wanted to have this opportunity to give you that advance notice today and to share with you what we have in mind going forward. Changes to the bylaws can be approved also at the December constitutional meeting. So that's the process. So if we can go forward, I'm going to start with the Gloria Dei specific changes. And I've grouped them into, isn't there a slide before, that?
One before that?
Yeah, it looks like you're ahead of me. I guess not. Okay, go ahead. Thank you. All right. The Gloria Dei specific ones. And so the first change that we're proposing, go ahead, is in discussion, we had a lot of conversation about our staffing model throughout the time when we were considering how to replace Pam. And in that process, we were talking about our leadership and just seeing that our leadership model is largely a team-oriented leadership rather than a hierarchical leadership within our staff. So when we looked at the Constitution and looked at the language of senior pastor, which suggests this hierarchical model, it seemed that that doesn't really reflect the way our staff works. Our staff really works collegially. And so we are proposing to take out the term senior pastor and replace it with pastor under call or contract to the congregation. It provides a little bit more flexibility also in responsibilities among our staff, but it also conveys this more egalitarian leadership style that is really the way our staff does business. So it seemed as if this was an opportunity to make that minor revision in our Constitution. I'll just pause for a moment if there are any questions about that before I go forward. All right, then let's look at that. That applies to all of those. Those are all the places in the Constitution where senior pastor is stated and where it would be replaced with language that defines the pastor under call or contract to this congregation. The next one is simply defining the meaning of pastor. And this will allow us to just not have to keep repeating that long phrase, but be able to say pastor and know that this is what it means. So this is simply a definition. The Mission Endowment Committee approached the Executive Committee and the council, asking that we make a change to the bylaw related to how they write checks. Currently, the Mission Endowment Committee, when they write checks getting grants, only the treasurer was required to sign those checks. And we felt as if it was a good check and balance to add the committee chair as well. So we have 2 signatories for checks that go from the Mission Endowment. Those are sometimes big checks. And it felt as if this was a more responsible way to handle that. So that change is one of our specific proposals. And then the third one, the change is to remove the requirement for a youth member on the council. It doesn't preclude having a youth member there, but it takes away the requirement. What we have found in practice is that very, very rarely, we can think of a couple of examples, Caitlin being one, and one of the Monson girls, I think, was perhaps in that position at one time, maybe. But relatively few times have we had a youth member on the council. And I discussed this with Marissa because I wanted to be sure that she was in agreement. And her comment was she's engaging young people now very much in youth ministry and in the education program. And her contention would be it's a much more fulfilling, much more meaningful way of them serving the congregation and being engaged in the congregation than sitting at council meetings would be. And so to that end, we're suggesting that we take away the requirement. Since we haven't been following it very well anyway, it's probably fine for us to remove that. This is a provision that will require 2 votes because it is a change from the model constitution. Lois, is that still true?
Except the bylaw, 12.02.01, that can be approved in December.
Oh, thank you. Lois is my constitution guru. So the bylaw can be approved in December, but the C-1201 and C-1202 would be the ones that we would need to vote on twice. So that's one of the other Gloria Dei specific provisions. And then a final one, I think this is the last one, is to eliminate the property management committee. This is not the property committee. We can't do without the property committee, but this is the property management committee. We had a special committee at Gloria Dei who oversaw the management of our rental properties, but you all know we sold our rental properties. And so the only property we have left that we're renting are parking spaces, and that is handled through the office. So we really no longer need this committee. So we can eliminate this from our constitution.
Hooray.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Then I'll very quickly go through the required changes from the ELCA. Again, you have the full copy that you can take with you, but we'll look through those just to briefly review what's included there. I have clustered these into three categories. There are changes that are related to inclusive language. There are changes that are for clarification, and there are editorial changes. So those are the types of changes we see here. And let's go ahead and look at. So in inclusive language, what you'll see here in C402 regarding our statement of purpose is an expansion of what we really mean by being inclusive. So it's simply more detailed, a more specific language than we had in the Constitution before. So all of the yellow highlighting is text that's being added in order to clarify more fully what we mean when we speak to the notion of serving everyone. Other example of inclusive language is the elimination of he or she, his or her. And those provisions are to move away from any sort of gender specification at all. So the language is being rewritten, and you'll see that when you look at the text, so that there's no reference to gender in the Constitution. And then another example of change related to specificity. This comes again, it's very similar to the language from Statement of Purpose, but this has to do with the expectations of rostered ministers. So in 903 and 923, again, it lays out in more detail what we mean when we speak of our inclusivity. Okay. The next. Oh, sorry, next. This is language related to disabilities. Again, trying to be more correct, I guess you could say, a slight editing in terms of the way in which we refer to this. This has to do with removal, this section has to do with removal of a minister of word and sacrament and removal of a minister of word and service if they have some incapacity that allows them to no longer perform their duties. And so you'll see that we've taken away physical or mental incapacity and just said in view of disability or incapacity without the descriptors. And then a more positive approach in the second paragraph. So again, trying to I guess you could say, correct our language. Okay. There are some changes from the model constitution that are for clarification. The addition of any of simply says these are reasons for termination of a pastor, and this list has not changed. So the reasons haven't changed. All this changed in the clarification said it could be for any of those reasons. In other words, it doesn't have to be all of them, but any one of those. So that's simply a clarification. And then another clarification here. This has to do with the process for discipline of members, and the earlier language indicated that it was three laypersons and 2 rostered ministers of word and sacrament who would serve on the consultation committee. And now that is 2 rostered ministers, so they could come from either the roster from word and sacrament or word and service. So it broadens the pool, I guess you could say, of people who could be involved in that process. This is simply, again, an addition of "and" in order to make it clear that both provisions need to be in place in order to amend a constitution. Before it just said A, B, but the "and" wasn't there. So now it's clearer because both are required. So it's, again, simply a clarification. And here, clarifying, this is regarding amendments as well. And here we're clarifying that the vote of approval is the congregation, not the synod. The way the sentence is constructed, one could think that it was a synod vote, but in fact, it's the congregation that votes on amendments. to our constitution. And so that's made clear by adding the word the congregations into that section. A couple of editorial changes, and I don't have any more explanation for this than that it's an editorial change. The word parochial was used in talking about the record keeping for the congregation, and the word parochial has been removed, and the explanation was that it was removed for consistency. And then finally, the word congregational was changed to congregation in reference to the meeting regarding call of minister. So those are two small editorial changes. And I believe that's it for the required. These are non-required. The executive staff and then executive committee and then council reviewed the non-required recommendations that came from the ELCA churchwide assembly, and we identified specific provisions that applied to us. A number of them did not. For example, there were a number of provisions that were submitted that had to do with congregations where the pastor is also the president of the council. We don't have that situation. We're not likely to have that situation here. And so those were irrelevant for us. So there's no point in us even taking those up. So we'll take up the ones that seem most relevant to us, and they are, drum roll, so exciting, right? One was the clarification of the term ex officio. And I must say that I was not always clear about ex officio members and their voting rights. But what the statement is here is that ex officio is used herein means membership with full rights of voice and vote unless otherwise expressly limited. So our pastor serves as an ex officio member on a number of committees. I serve as an ex officio member on some committees. And we had, I think both Roger and I had the misunderstanding that we didn't have voting rights. Untrue. And indeed, when I went back and looked at Robert's Rules of Order, indeed, this is true. We should have been able to vote. So we had more power than we thought.
And all those nail biter votes.
Absolutely. Some of them were so close. So this expressly defines that, and we'll make it clear in our Constitution. Another one is a simple technical matter that this calls for submission of funds that we forward to the Synod, going to the Synod treasurer, and in fact, the recommendation is to remove the word treasurer, so they go to the Synod. We don't have anyone with the title treasurer in our Synod. Our person is called the associate to the bishop for finance. So taking out the word treasurer seems appropriate for us. And those are the changes. Did it in a fairly good time. I have to tell you, I can't thank all of these people enough who have endured this process and so far and have guided me in this process. So if there are any questions or comments, I'm certainly happy to try to entertain them. Thank goodness Lois is here and she can really answer questions. Are there any? Yes.
So just for the new people here, how much it looks like there's a fair amount of discretion for local churches to tailor make it to your your particular needs, and that the larger organization do not have the majority of it doesn't tell you exactly what you have to have in here.
I'll start with answering that, and then I'll let Lois follow up. But my understanding is that we are obliged to adopt the model constitution, and if we vary from that, there are specific requirements for varying from that. Lois, do you want to follow up with that?
Well, it provides the framework of what is required, and you can tailor make it. And there are requirements, and if you vary from it, then it requires the 2 votes, like taking out the youth member. But there really is, the model constitution is a good guideline for us. And then that's where you put in your bylaws to make it specific of what you want in your congregation if you want to add some details. The Constitution is not all inclusive of everything for the congregation. Many things do not belong in the Constitution. So I think that Gloria Dei has an exceptional pattern for its Constitution. And that goes back to, I think back to 2009 or that, we had changes made. And the one thing that has been very good about our congregation, we have kept up to date so that we have good pattern for our operation.
I'm going to repeat or at least summarize what Lois has said for the people online. So we have a model constitution that comes to us from the LCA that provides us a framework, and then we work within that framework to tailor to our congregation. If we we have the opportunity to include bylaws that give us an opportunity to very specifically tailor to the needs of our specific congregation. And we have a process in place for doing that. And finally, that Gloria Dei has so far been very diligent about keeping our Constitution up to date. Pretty good, pretty well.
Which sometimes doesn't matter until it does.
That's right.
I think that's the important thing to say about constitutions, and I appreciate so many of you being here because, most of the time we kind of have it sitting over there and we don't really think about it enough. And yet when problems arise, we will be happy to have paid attention to it and to have it there for us. It's there, as I said at the beginning, for the protection of the congregation and the protection of our staff.
Roger mentioned, we don't think about it, but when a problem arises, it's very important. And in particular, an area of our Constitution that we've not had a concern about are the conflicts and how those problems are solved by going to the Synod. So you have a guideline of what to do. We're fortunate it's there and we haven't needed it.
Right. We are fortunate that those provisions for dealing with conflicts are there, but we have not had to turn to them. Any other questions?
And we hope that continues.
We do hope that continues. You bet. All right. Then I would ask if there are any other topics related to council work or any things that councilors want to bring up today. This is, after all, not just about the Constitution. It's a council listening post. Yes.
Being new to the congregation, what is your format now? You're saying there's going to be a congregational constitutional meeting in December, possibly something in January.
Let me explain that.
The annual meeting is when
I will.
church council members change.
Yeah.
So I don't have that.
Yeah, that picture. I'm going to share a little bit about how we run things for people who are new to Gloria Dei, based on this question. I think it's a very good question. So I'll start with meetings, and we will have 2 meetings on December 11th. One of those meetings will be to consider and approve the budget for the coming year. Immediately after that meeting, we will have locked the doors so you can't leave. We will have a meeting regarding these constitutional changes and seek votes for approval on these constitutional changes. So that happens on December 11th. On January 29th, we have our annual congregational meeting. Now it's congregation. Our annual meeting. And at that meeting, we will consider any issues that come before the whole congregation, including this one section of the Constitution that will require a second vote. And so that congregational meeting is January 29th. All of those meetings require a quorum. So it is very important that members attend.
May I make an
You
observation?
may.
Some congregations, I don't know, I think perhaps Gloria Dei at one time would do one annual meeting a year. And they would do all business, including the budget, which sometimes works. The kind of somewhat weird thing about that is you get to the January 1 and we haven't actually approved the budget yet. And sometimes we would kind of just wink at each other and start acting like we had, which was, it didn't feel great. But churches do it. The other thing is that budgets tend to have conversation, and sometimes more than others. And that when there are other things going on, like for example, maybe we're considering a capital appeal, or we're considering a major, sometimes actual conversation about what does it mean to be the church gets sidetracked because everybody wants to make sure the budget is dealt with. So sometimes in January, we haven't had a lot of stuff going on, and that's been fine too. But other times, if you have some other, or like when we were deciding officially to become a reconciling in Christ congregation, we wanted to discuss that, and we discussed it long, and we didn't want that to get lost in budget things. So that's why. By the way, the reason there are 2 meetings on that one day in December, first a budget meeting, then a constitutional meeting, is because of reasons that some people understand and we believe them. Correct?
Right.
All right. That is deep in the bowels of Robert's Rules of Order is the reason apparently that we're going to do that. And I thank you to those of you who understand why, because we are doing it properly, right? Okay.
And then, okay, I was going to continue, but go ahead. Yes, go ahead.
I was going to say, the other thing that wasn't mentioned about January is we elect all these people.
I'm coming to that. Thank you. So thank you for bringing that up. Very timely. So we have that congregational meeting in January. We will soon begin the process of nominating candidates for committee chairs and for council. And that election will be held at the annual meeting on January 29th. So that process is about to begin. We'll be beginning in another month or so. That nominations committee will start to work on that. And then those officers assume their positions immediately after that meeting, and they meet and elect their officers. So the council members will elect their council president, vice president, secretary at that immediately after that January 29th meeting. And then we start the year. All right, yes, Roma.
Apparently not. I just wanted to say that I am the liaison from fellowship onto council. And I would just absolutely love to have more people involved in fellowship. We are the fun people. Okay? We have fun. And we make fun things for the congregation. For example, December 11th, we got a bus and we're going to go to White Christmas at Circuit 21. And all it costs is $50 per person for the bus, the ticket, and there's a supper, and then you have White Christmas. Now, how could you pass that? Really, that's a fun thing. Okay? I just wanted to know if anybody wants to be on that committee, we would welcome you with balloons or confetti or whatever Dave can come up with. Thank you.
And I'll extend that invitation to people online. Roma
Okay.
Panther has encouraged people to join the one fun committee we have, which is fellowship. And so if you're interested in being a member of that committee, please contact Roma Panther.
Thank you.
Thank you, Roma. Any other? Yes.
So for voting in January,
Yep.
if someone is off in Florida enjoying warmth and recreation, I'm thinking of one person in particular. Can you vote remotely, or is it in person only and be present on that particular meeting?
My understanding is it's be present on that day, correct?
Well, we did remote.
We actually made
Did we make-
remote voting legal. It's how we've met.
Oh.
The issue would be if we want to offer a hybrid meeting. But we did make the change at the recommendation of the Senate a few years ago, making remote digital
We can.
participation.
We can.
Good.
Okay, our parliamentarian has said we can
So the clarification is that you have to be participating
in the meeting.
Yeah,
You couldn't do a proxy where you're not benefiting from the discussion of the meeting.
Yeah.
So if you do it electronically and hybrid, you are participating in the meeting. So that would allow the vote. But the reason was because of the value of the participation in the meeting.
Exactly. So to clarify and share what the comments from the room, it is possible to vote remotely if you join the meeting remotely and are a participant in the meeting, then you have the option to vote. Thank you.
Okay, if someone hasn't asked for a secret ballot.
How about a mail-in ballot?
Well, and somewhere along the line, I hope the congregation is notified of those options. I mean,
Oh, yes.
snowbirds leave like now. You know, that's the point. A lot of these, but I hope they continue with email notification if they have it. But that's what happens. People that communication gets lost somewhere along the line because I know what I thought, what I heard at this meeting. So I'm going to tell my story and I'm not in the right way. So it's like, you know, that is my suggestion.
I appreciate that, so, and I think we will work diligently at communication to make sure that everyone has the
That
opportunity.
quorum is important. I understand that discussion. There's value to this.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you. Any other things for the good of the cause?
So they would be included in the core.
Yeah, they will, if they are online, if they are present online, they'll count in the quorum, yeah, in the quorum count.
yeah, Doug, last time we had the vote, had who was all online forming and to keep track of that, so we had the idea of how many were actually participating.
Okay,
So I had to ask him how many are actually online.
right, following the whole thing.
But I'm sure there's a way to, like, Thomas does monitor.
He did.
Doug does that,
Just like you'd sign up for an online.
right, course or something, yeah. Yeah, so Doug keeps that number for us.
Doug, you are a magician.
He is, Doug is our. Any other questions or concerns?
Is the vote, please.
Well, thank you all so much. I know this is not, it's not the most exciting action-packed topic, but as we've said, it is important to have it in place and to have it up to date. So appreciate all of you being here today, and I will count on you being there in December. Have a good rest of your
Do you
day.
want to mention
Well,
that December 4th
thanks
is
to all
another?
the people that are on that list.
Yeah.
Even though
I
you're
should-
not on that
In
list.
closing, just let me remind you that on December 4th, we will have a forum that will focus on the budget. So that'll be an opportunity to look at the budget, review it, and have an idea of it before we come around to the vote. Thank you.
Yep.